Bienvenidos a Caminos Culturales. Yo soy Chuy Martínez. Este programa es dedicado a nuestra comunidad de habla hispana. En este programa exploraremos el arte, la poesía, la música, la historia de nuestra comunidad. Y ahora veamos lo siguiente. Bienvenidos a su programa Caminos Culturales. Yo soy Chuy Martínez. As we do every week, we present different topics. This program's topic is going to be on activism. Another great activist, amigo, compañero de lucha, Fred Reade, is besides being a writer, a poet. I mean, he's done so many things. Written 3 major books and done so many research papers. He's a videographer as well, a documentarist, and he also is a PhD in Chicano studies. So welcome, Fred.
Thank you. Yeah, I have the honor and distinction of being the first, I believe, the first true Chicano studies with a bachelor's degree. Because again, when I went to UNM, it was required 128 hours to graduate with a university studies degree. That was the college I was in, and because I felt so inadequate to follow a traditional curriculum, you had the ability to develop your own curriculum. So I was just taking nothing but classes that would empower me, and I ended up with 138 hours of upper division coursework in Chicano studies. So I put that down in my application, and at the time Dean Richard Grego accepted it, but in the process they changed it back, and they just did a master's degree or a PhD in the humanities.
You were overqualified.
Yeah. And what brought me to that, I think, was my childhood experiences and in experiencing the racism. I wasn't in school more than 3 hours, and I was taken from the classroom to the principal's and got paddled for speaking Spanish on the school premises. No, and I think that was probably my first experience of discrimination and racism, and kind of set my path and interest in what I've done today. Most recently, I completed a book titled Ecos del Pueblo. Okay, well, it's based on my dissertation and research, and it's a theoretical book. It's called Ecos del Pueblo, decolonized voices, Chicano voices, decolonized mind, and emancipatory theory. And what I ended up with is I probably got 20 years of collecting ethno-histories from the activists throughout the whole year. And I mean, when I began, I started collecting the corridos, la música, and and collecting the background, the history of what brought them to producing these ballads, these corridos. And I mean, there were some fascinating stories about what brought them to that point and inspiration to write the corridos. And then from there, I went on and I interviewed the principal players.
That's what I'm impressed with that, because you got all the stories, not from the dark rooms of
the
libraries and all this archives, places, archival places, but you actually went and interviewed a lot of the people in this.
Well, you know, in 1980, I was accepted into a prestigious school, Anthropology Film Center in Santa Fe, and there I got the training for doing shooting cinema. There they trained us in 16 millimeter film, and then by the time I graduated from there, it was only a 2-year program, but I did some video. The video wasn't that good, so we were more focused on doing film, and then from there I stepped off into going around and collecting all these guys' history. And I mean, I've got both Alfonso Sanchez, who was the district attorney at the time. I did Tejerina, of course, and all his lieutenants. Many of his lieutenants surviving lieutenants. I missed a lot of them. You know, if I started 5 or 10 years earlier, I would have gotten even better, a better collection.
Yeah.
But you know, you start where you start, you know, and you just keep doing.
Yeah, and then you also interviewed some of the people from the Tierra Amarilla land grant, Pedro Archuleta and
Right.
Who were the other ones? Oh well,
Ike de Vargas.
Ike de Vargas, and
You know, although he was in Vietnam in 1967. He showed up a few months later, but he was very instrumental in the activism and the building of the Partido La Raza Unida.
I remember
Yeah.
that. I actually found it one of the recordings.
Yeah.
That the
We're gonna have to do it. Get
Corrido de
it.
la Raza Unida.
Yeah, we gotta get that to my collection then.
Yeah.
But those, I mean, their story is interesting because in Rio Arriba County and San Miguel County, they were strong, and they pretty much established the political platform for both the Republican and Democratic Party. Had it not been for the Partido de Raza Unida, things would not have moved as progressive as they had.
Yeah.
You know, so that was a really good sort of, and it's still an untold story. A few people
Yeah.
know about that. Now Echoes focuses on the Tierra Maria courthouse raid
Right.
of June 5th, 1967. Okay, and I got my first book, Justicia, the New Mexico land grant movement from 56 to 58.
Wow.
And that one, I did my best to stay as close to the original narratives that I collected to build this story and make it more accessible to the everyday reader, because so that's why it's in a narrative form as a novelas. I call it a docu novela, so there's a lot of Spanish and English mixed in this, but I translate it. You know, I use a smaller font in English to emphasize the Spanish, because I look forward to having those people that don't speak Spanish very well but are of Spanish heritage get exposure to it.
No, y se necesita. Somos un estado bilingüe, que la verdad los dos idiomas son idiomas dominantes iguales, equal, dominant. Porque mucha gente no entiende, mucha gente piensa que somos más inglés, que hablamos más inglés que español, pero la verdad no. Entre nuestra gente,
la primera idioma.
Bueno, you and I, when we talk, you know, hablamos.
Caló.
Yeah, that's another
topic.
El caló is, of course, you know, it's another part of our culture, and then of course there's a lot of modismos, no, que se usaban, pero en este libro, The Justicia, you touched in one of the main topics or main problems that we still have from way back, which is the land grant movement.
Yeah.
And you met a lot of those people, ¿no? Including, ¿cómo se llamaba? Elogio.
Elogio era el carcelero que asesinaron.
Oh, that's right, ese era otro.
Yeah.
No.
Pero,
El de Tierra Amarilla, ¿cómo se llamaba este señor? El que tenía el sign ese grandote en su tierra.
los Archuletas y Pedro Archuleta y Daniel, God damn. Ahora no se me pasó el apellido.
The senior moment,
yeah.
Yo también, a mí se me olvida todo. But anyway, todos esos those times it was so inspiring. Yo me acuerdo de ir a los a las matanzas que tenían, the celebrations, and then of course, like you were saying earlier, the persecution that a lot of these people suffer from, especially Pedro Archuleta, cuando he had to exile allá.
He was in the joint. They imprisoned him because he exercised his First Amendment and self-incrimination in some hearings in Washington D.C. and he did federal time for not cooperating with the committee. Y luego también Moises Morales. You know, but he didn't do any jail time, but they had him tied up in the courts for an awful long time. They were after him, and they set those guys up pretty atrociously. They they planted marijuana in their in their vehicles and in their properties to get them all tied up legally, So there was a lot of intrigue and stealth that was going on, secrecy. I got at one interview with an undercover agent, Tim Chapa, who was on the payroll of the New Mexico Mounted Patrol, and he admitted that he set up that he burned down the Mundy property up in Tierra Maria, and cuando le estaban echando la culpa a los aliancistas, pero era un empleo del estado, de la policía, and y luego también he's got he also confessed to masterminding and setting up the killing of Antonio Cordova and what's his other name? Antonio and do you remember the name? Antonio Cordova, and who was an aliancista, and he was working for El Grito, but he was also with the Black Berets. And then there was the other guy, I can't remember, but anyway, they both got shot up there in Black Mesa, but that was with
Antonio, not ¿Quién
Tito.
hablaba de eso? El que hablaba de eso, Jaime Chávez. He wrote a poem about him.
Anyway, they were set up by this undercover agent Tim Chapa, and he gave me his interview because he had been diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and before it got any worse, he wanted to share that history, and the courts refused to open up the file again, and so nothing ever came of it. There was a lot of stuff. Bobby Garcia, a young Chicano student at UNM, was assassinated over there by Tomea, but we were in Manzano, in the Manzano Mountains. He was taken from UNM area, y lo llevaron, y era un bueno, es que era buen muchacho, he wasn't real aggressive or real radical, pero they picked him up, and some undercover agents killed him. Eso es lo que dice el pueblo.
Ellos eran los que sabían todo.
Yeah, pues ellos estaban
you couldn't get any official evidence unless you would go and talk to these people, las comadres, los compadres, los vatos del barrio, they knew, or they were either present or witnesses, or they were, or they knew a guy that had been there.
Yeah.
Eso es lo que pasaba antes cuando había tantas injusticias que no se podían probar, pero la gente sabía.
Yeah.
And that's why people
So you
were
can,
so...
but and that's why I was drawn to that. No, not only because I wasn't ever real enthusiastic about spending my time in the library going through old official files of the government. No, I dedicated my career to going out into the pueblo and collecting las voces del pueblo, you know, and when their interpretation of their experiences as they were participants in the movement, no?
Yeah,
Because those are too often left out.
exactly.
You know, they're traditionally ignored, and then the thing is that you get a lot of academics that come into there with their sort of arrogant attitude, and that just shuts a lot of people down. You know, the common man, you know, or woman.
And that's the problem with academia, is that they do all their research, especially now in the computers. You know, Google this, Google that.
Yeah.
But this has so much value when you go and talk to the people directly, and you have their statements, their experiences, and their truth. Because a lot of times it's another thing. Writers tend to kind of enhance or twist
to their own bias, no?
Yeah.
And especially if you're not of the community, you know, you get when you do talk to the participants, they're going to give you a point of view that you want to hear, and that's not going to really challenge the status quo, no. But if you come from the community, then people are more frank and honest with you.
Yeah.
You know, and it requires a lot of time to build that trust. So that's why I don't call my work oral histories. I call it ethno histories, because it's an ethnography. I spent the time with the community. I know the community. I'm a part of that community, and therefore they're more intimate and honest with me and forthright about their information.
Exactly, and they trust someone like you and others that grew up in El Barrio, that grew up with their own, knowing their lingo and their ways of life.
De cultura, no?
Yeah, because sometimes when somebody, a student, when you come with this kind of sophisticated airs and trying to interview people, they right away they get suspicious.
Or they're good, yeah.
And that's what I was saying earlier about, when you go to school, you must have done so well, because you already had that school, the barrio school.
Yeah,
You already had all those the stories and the education that you got from the activists.
The experience of, being a child and your first experience out of home in the first grade, 5, 6 years old, and then getting paddled for speaking your heritage language. That was my first language, man. And they took a paddle to us, and that has a deep scar. It still does today, but it also encouraged me to stay steadfast to my beliefs, and pointed me in the direction of coming up with a methodology on how to understand and deconstruct racism, no? And discrimination.
So tell us about the other books.
Okay, well, the third book is Cuentos Mercederos, and this is a collection of cuentos, fables, children's stories that were being told en el campo en aquel entonces. You know, por ejemplo, la primera tragedia del mundo, the first tragedy of the world, era cuando el coyote deceived the mother deer and ate her. You know, and the moral to that story was, mira, mijo, ves, tienes que poner mucho cuidado porque nunca sabes su traicionado. You know, there's treachery and danger and traitors, you know, and you got to be careful with that. Igual como nos robaron las tierras, así como lo hizo el coyote a la mamá venada. You know, the other one, another favorite in the book is when the pajaritos carpinteros were friends with the coyotes, and they compartían en comida, you know, comiendo juntos. Pues esta vez estaban teniendo la comida en la casa de los pájaros y entraron los coyotes así brillando, bien bonitos, bien comaditos y bañados, and they were all spiffied up because Father Coyote wanted to display that he could look as pretty and attractive as the beautiful birds. And what he had done is he had made a fire just before they went into the dining room and put hot coals under their arms so they would be brillaban, so they would be brilliant, ¿no? Pues naturalmente se quemaron. You know, la muchacha salió, brincó para el río, el muchacho salió, brincó, mamá salió, y luego el papá, el coyote fue y brincó en el río, and, you know, put out the hot coals that they had put under their arms. And then Father Pajarito turns around and tells his family, ¿Vieron lo que pasó? Es porque querían ser lo que no son. Siempre tienes orgullo por lo que eres. You know, and that was a real impactful cuento when I heard that to me, because, you know, that was my experience. I mean, from the first grade, and that experience of getting paddled and always being told, you know, that I wasn't worthy, and then to hear that cuento from those ancianos was impactful to me.
Well, yeah, I think that a lot of those that's the old way of educating people. The cuentos, los dichos, los corridos, canciones that were used for many years in the small pueblitos.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we didn't have access to mass media. We didn't have the access to the mainstream newspapers, or, you know, back in the 60s, it was the dawn of film, of taking film out into the interviews, to the sites, you know, the incidences. It was still, you know, a real chore to carry around these big old humongous cameras and cables, and it's not like it is today where we got, you know, these little cameras that we can set up on our phones and stuff, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, we did that. Our form of communication goes back to the 10th century with the earliest corrido, or the romance of Mio Cid, you know, in his epic story.
Right.
That's the oldest written corrido that we have. I'm calling it a corrido. They call it a romance, because from the romance evolved the corrido. We just changed the structure of the way we write it down.
And even before that, well, you know, up to the 1800s, when there was no television or radio or anything, the corridistas played a big part in disseminating the news.
Mm-hmm.
That they, as I understand, they got all this information from the trader, people trading back and forth. They got the news, and they will set up at the plaza and sing about the corridos,
de las nuevas del otro pueblo,
yeah.
de lo que
But
sucedió,
what was
¿verdad?
happening around.
Y, I mean, there's even documentation of infiltrators going into the federal camps, or vice versa, into the revolutionary camps in the Mexican Revolution, no?
Mm-hmm.
And they would be they would go and they would hear all these the plans or what was going to happen with Obregón and Carranza, and then they would go and the troubadoras would be singing the corrido, mandándoles la información de lo que van a hacer los federales, no?
Yeah.
So, I mean, there was even that sort of exchange
It was like a
of
code.
moves.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
you know, like even today you have, you know, today it's more of a rap sound, no? It doesn't have the same sonido, but I think our Chicanitos that are poets, contemporary poets, are still following the corrido tradition, but in a modern form. You know, I mean, they're doing it with rap, but the structure, much of the structure is still in quatrains,
Yeah.
¿verdad? I mean, you tú como músico, you know, you probably recognize that better than I do.
Oh yeah.
You know,
yeah.
that when you hear the rappers, the youth, you know, doing their more contemporary songs, even the political stuff that they talk about, you know.
Well, you know, I did an interview with Jose Montoya. You remember Jose Montoya from the Royal Chicano Air Force. You know, he was from Rociada.
Oh, sí.
Right here, right by Chilili.
Yeah.
And him and Melequias, they used to have, of course, they moved to California, like a lot of New Mexico.
Yeah, they made the
Mexicans, you know,
migration.
they migrated. And he was probably one of the first Chicanos that got a PhD. They did his dissertation in Pachuquismo.
Yeah.
And he got a PhD in Pachuquismo and introduced a lot of words, just like the poet Ricardo Sanchez, into the Webster's dictionary. But he used to talk a lot about that. I remember having conversations with him, and he used to talk about how the Calo, or the Pachuco language, served so much into like the like a code, so people would not know what the hell they were talking about.
Yeah.
You know, and it was one of the main purposes of using.
Yeah, para comunicación.
Yeah, like all the way back from the Korean War, and then of course a lot of the prisoners, people in prison, they used to use a lot of the Kalo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The slang. Yeah.
Yeah.
Inventing their own words. Yeah. But
so what are you doing now? What are your plans for?
well, right now what I'm doing is I won a Books to Movie Award. You know, and from the International Latino Book Festival.
Wow.
And I'm working on the fourth book, but you know, with a different focus, and want to finish that up. And I've got some. I'm waiting to see if I'm going to get funding for to do a PBS documentary on the land grant movement, and I'm just going to keep going, man. I'm just getting started.
That's great. So show us your books again, and where can we find them? The public can find them.
Okay, well, you can find the books on Amazon.
Okay.
And so you just go by my name is probably the best way to go. Is you know, and aunque tengo nombre americano, you know, ya soy, you know, 6 generaciones removed from the Reade name, you know? But and it has an unusual spelling, and you can see it here in the books.
So it is. You go under Federico
Reade.
Reade, That's Reade.
I'm a CS.
Reade. Federico Reade. I think the cuentos for children is very, very important.
Well, they're in black and white.
Uh-huh.
The drawings, no?
Uh-huh.
The drawings are black and white, and it's both in English and Spanish. So for those of us that struggle with our Spanish or want to practice it, ahí está. And you can, so entiendes lo que estás diciendo.
Okay, yeah.
And then I got an introductory essay in this one that tells you how it was used to politicize the politicization of the cuentos, and how they were put into political, made the connection with the Chicano movement.
Wow.
And how they elaborated on those stories.
And also the land grant. Is that how many land grants are there here in New Mexico, you think?
I can't remember the exact number. I think there's the number that comes to mind is 170 some or 180 some but most of them didn't get patents, didn't get American patents, or their documents were lost during the territorial period in the original office of the archives that they had in Santa Fe. There was that moment after 1967 in the courthouse raid. There was an awakening in consciousness, and collectively the community chose to challenge, the mundane or ordinary way that we were seen in our relationship to mainstream society, And so we had a conscious awakening and began to challenge, and that's what the corridos reveal. If you look at those corridos, that was the point. That was the honeymoon period of the Chicano movement, where they were celebrating, and recognizing their ethnic identity with pride and empowered. Whereas before, in the 1950s, 40s, 30s, 20s, there was a lot of discrimination that was forcing them to abandon. And that's why you find we were talking earlier about the Presbyterians that changed from the Presbyterian Church to the other. That reminds me, I came across some evidence of why the capilla, the cathedral in Santa Fe, isn't completed. And the crowns, the spires.
Yeah.
It doesn't have the capstones on the church, like they do in France and in Europe. And that was because Lamy was taxing all the Católicos, for everything. He was just trying to, so he could have money to build his church. And the staircase. Well, he died before they got to that. And then so the community at that point got together and said, "Ya no más. We're not going to pay for any more of this. You built that church around our church. You took it apart. You built this structure, and it's not, in our view, representative of our existence. And you imposed this other European Gothic sort of style church, and you want us to pay for it." And that's where you got a lot of at that time there was it cost so much to get married through the church. Lemy would put so much money, so the penitentes had their own ceremony of consummating a marriage in the community. And the community recognized it's a really pretty ceremony where they where they do an entrega. And what an entrega, it tells the story of the boy or the male and the woman, and how they come together, how they met, and how they became and how they have made this commitment to one another, and they're announcing it before the community. And there's this whole ritual. But that's pretty much, you see it less and less every year, no?
Yeah.
So, but porque no saben.
Some places they still do that. Cause not long ago, a friend of mine did an entrega. Uh,
Se
there's
casó con
people that are
ella.
still, carrying the tradition, and many others.
Yeah.
That's what's unique about New Mexico is that there's so much tradition, and it's hard to break traditions.
And the thing is that we don't understand the origins of those traditions.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I'm trying to say is that those origins were really propagated during that period of American Catholicism in coming into the annexed territories that were once Mexican, and then before that Spanish. But
And French influences.
well, the French never really made their way up here, but yeah,
but the influence.
technically,
Yeah,
he didn't. Maximilian didn't stick around long enough to have an effect. But a lot of those Frenchmen defected and they stayed in Mexico. No, I don't know if any ever made it up as far north as here, but
there's still some in Mora in a lot of those places.
a lot of those guys are
Not just-
ancestors of trappers, fur trappers that came in from Canada.
The Frenchmen, and there's German families there too.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Well, this is so interesting. We could probably go on and on all day talking about the history of New Mexico. But if you want to find out more, read those books. It's very important that we get our history together in firsthand, because it's sometimes when it's passed on from generation to generation, it's it changes a little bit, but when it's done by researchers and this, I don't know, for some reason, I still value that, but the quality of the narratives aren't the same. So we want to thank you for la plática,
Muchas gracias.
and good luck on your future projects.
Bueno, pues,
We hope we can collaborate with you and many others, and we can talk to you next time when you finish your next book.
y siempre su servidor. Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias, compadre. Appreciate
Okay.
it. That was very nice.
We've known each other for a long time. The first time we met was in 1976, and we were at the conference when Jimmy Carter introduced the idea of fencing up the southern border, and we were calling it the tortilla curtain.
Yeah.
Did you ever do any música using that word, that phrase?
I think
Because I remember you performing. That's where I met you.
Yeah.
You were performing there
in
San Antonio.
San Antonio. Hector Galan recorded some stuff that we did at the Aztlán, ¿cómo se llama? The Guadalupe
The Guadalupe Center in San Antonio.
That's when they first started opening it up. Yeah. Well, there's so much history.
Yeah, and then Lalo Delgado, the poet.
Yeah.
You remember he was the farm worker poet. I rode with him in the bus. No,
Yeah.
that was my first real exposure to that man. That was he was a cool guy.
Everybody
And then
was
Antonio
a-
Alcantara that got his leg blown off, the bomb that was set up, and everybody else was killed. He was the only survivor in Boulder. Yeah, he was. He was at that conference too, and he went with. I was with that Denver contingent at that time.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the
it was
Cortistas.
Yeah, it was pretty good.
Yeah.
But I've got the 1988 incident. When Pedro and Daniel, took over the Loma. They call it La Loma, where they built that big old billboard with Emiliano Zapata.
Oh yeah, Tierra o Muerte.
Yeah, Tierra o Muerte, and the accolades that I received on that is they've declared it came out about 25th of 100 documentaries on Chicano studies, on Chicano history. I was number 25. I was ranked the 25th best documentary on Chicano studies,
Yeah, and it was
Chicano history.
narrated by the great Sabino Livarri.
Yeah, so yeah,
You
con la
remember
voz,
Sabino Livarri?
yeah, in his voice, yeah, his baritone voice, and but yeah, in the Journal of Aztlan, you can find those rankings. There was an article that appeared where they ranked all the best films from that point on. From I don't know, I guess it was 1992 edition of the Journal of Aztlan, but that was that's a good story.
I remember you know Hector Galan.
Yeah.
Hector Galan and I, we met when he was 19, I was 17, and we were already, doing stuff. He was doing a program called Aztlan out of Texas Tech University in Lubbock.
Yeah.
That's where he went
started.
to school.
That's where he started.
Yeah,
And he's one of our premier documentary filmmakers in the country. He's produced more programming than anybody that I know of. There isn't another Chicano producer that's made the national scene like he has.
He did that one when we estaba ¿cómo es que se llamaba? Antonio Rendain. We went to Washington, D.C. Walking. It was a march from Austin, Texas to Washington, D.C.
With Armando Rendon.
Con el Armando Rendon, yeah. Anyway, when we got there were thousands and thousands of people there. And we thought, oh man, because we had picked up a lot of people, throughout all the states. And when we got there was all these people, and we were like, oh man, they're waiting for us and everything. No, they were protesting. They were protesting Carter's invitation to Pinochet, Stroessner, all those dictators from South America. and you saw the mall was full, and we thought, oh, this is good. They're waiting for us. But it was so funny. But anyway, Hector did a beautiful documentary on La Marcha de Justicia from Austin to Washington.
Yeah, we should revive that whole catchword of the tortilla curtain, because that was a big thematic thing at that San Antonio conference, and it was
some music for that. I'm not sure. It was crazy. We were crazy.
I wondered if you had ever produced anything.
Well, if I did, I don't have it because I'd lost so much stuff. I used to move around.
Yeah.
I moved around.
Nomás lo tenías aquí.
Most of the stuff was in my mind, yeah. But
and if you don't use it again,
I have boxes and boxes that every time I moved, I left them behind. One time I left a whole car full of stuff, documents, flyers, posters, and Clovis, and I never went back for that car. So I was always wondering what happened to it.
Yeah.
Yep. Anyway,
were you involved? Did you go with for the Poor People's March?
Yeah,
March.
I was there. And not only that one, but many of the others, the other marches that were happening, like in Arizona. A lot of people don't think Arizona was
pretty active.
Well, pretty active, especially the unions.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I was asking if you knew Alberto, because Alberto was involved in a lot of the mine strikes and the unions, mining unions. The Canto al Pueblos, Canto al Pueblo, Floricanto.
Right.
All those festivals that were Chicano festivals that we used to go to. All the Chicano poets and singers the theater was big around that
Teatro.
time, especially the street theater.
¿Verdad?
Yeah. Anyway, compadre, yo creo
Did
que
you-
nos vemos.
What would you also did some stuff with the Teatro Camposino, I mean Teatro de Albuquerque, no?
Teatro
With
Albuquerque.
Rodriguez
And you know,
and Picante with
y la teatro, su teatro de Denver, Teatro Esperanza de Superior, I mean, that Teatro Esperanza de allá de Tucson, Arizona.
yeah.
And
Nunca se grabó.
some of them are still, in fact, I've been looking for some of those because I used to have little, those little mini DVDs, not DVDs, mini Super
Yeah,
8.
there was Super 8, Mini DV, yeah.
Yeah,
Probably
and
Super 8, what you're talking.
well, when we were when we started filming Lo Maduro de la Cultura, we used to do it on Super 8, mini DVD, and Beta.
Yeah, Beta.
All those
Well,
those
Beta was
formats.
the high class stuff, man. Was the good stuff.
Those formats were we did it all. I mean, 23 years
Yeah, yeah.
of filming all those. And before that, of course, we used to have those reel-to-reels. Remember those? What were they
16
called?
millimeter
The
film.
16 millimeter.
An 8mm film, with the home cameras, no?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Híjole.
Qué relaje que no lo guardamos, no?
A lot of that, I'm sure they're still around, some of that stuff.
In private collections.
Yeah. I know that there were a lot of people that were students, especially. They used to go and document some of those things.
Yeah.